Viewers like you make this program possible. Support your local PBS station.
I want to show you something you're not going to see every day of the week. This is a whole roast saddle of veal. We're going to serve it with a Madeira sauce, stuffed braised onions, and buttered asparagus tips. It's going to be a delicious main course. Look what we have for dessert. These are glazed California oranges with orange peel decoration. And these little beautiful chocolate truffles, we saw them being made the other day in a chocolate factory. Oh, look at that dog in chocolate. And there's an Easter bunny. And a carousel filled with chocolate animals riddled with chocolates. And a bunny in an autocar. And this giant egg, that's beautiful.
Julia, take this hammer and break it.
No, Dana.
I'm the president of the company. Break it.
All right. Gosh, filled with chocolates.
Those are chocolate truffles.
Gosh, can I have one?
You may. Go ahead.
Oh boy. How do you make them?
Let me show you. We have to break the chocolate first.
Okay. Wow.
We want pieces about this big,
Yeah.
ready for melting. This is our dark,
Oh, look at
bittersweet
that.
chocolate.
Oh, is it all melted and ready now?
It's ready to go. We have to pour it into buckets to bring to our workstation.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Oh, boy, isn't that beautiful?
Oh, it's wonderful.
And now what?
I've got an old military cooker here,
Ha! Look at that.
and we cook about 50-pound batches. This is
Yeah.
8 pounds of melted sugar.
Caramelized.
Now, we need to add butter to this mixture. We're going to start with about 6 pounds of butter. All right, Julia, now we're ready to add the cream to our butter and sugar. Now, we have to be careful here because it splatters all over the place. Frank and Greg are going to take the caramel and cream, pour it into the cream beater to cool it down. Now the mixture's cool enough, we're ready to add the chocolate. The next step is to add the flavors. In this case, we're going to use chartreuse.
2 whole bottles. It's getting quite thick.
You'll see why in a minute. It's getting stiff so that we can knead it. Now we get all the lumps out on this marble slab. And this marble slab is very cold, so it brings it down to a stiff consistency very quickly. Today we're making coated truffles.
Uh-huh.
So we take this plate, slide it in
And the
here.
stuff is in here, is it?
We put the mass in here.
Yep.
Roll it once, roll it twice, cut the lever.
Boy.
Chocolate truffles ready for dipping. Now at this station, Ethel and Victoria take the truffles and dip them in chocolate. She drops it into her hand, mushes it with chocolate, and slides it over. And watch how she carefully puts a C right on the chocolate.
That's for chartreuse.
C is for chartreuse.
Oh, yes.
Now here, Ethel is taking a final tray of ephemera truffle, and she's putting the characteristic dribble of chocolate truffles
That's
over the
just
top.
charming. They look so pretty. They're just lovely.
And here's the final product. I hope your guests enjoy.
My guess. I think I'm going to eat every one myself, Dana. They're just beautiful. Thank you so much.
Bon appetit.
It wasn't too difficult coming up with something really elegant to go with our chocolate truffles because I immediately thought of veal. I thought also it might be interesting to see the kinds of roasts of veal that are available. This is a rolled boneless shoulder, and you see it's got a little net on it, so that's all ready to roast. It's about $3 a pound, and it makes a nice roast, but not a particularly elegant one. Now here's some other choices at about $6 a pound. These are from the leg. That's the bottom round. That's the part that you can get very nice scallops and scallopini from. Here's another roast from the leg. That's the knuckle. You have to tie that, and then you're ready to roast it. That wasn't really quite elegant enough, and so I decided on the saddle. And this is a whole saddle of veal. And the saddle is the whole small of the back. Look, it comes from here. There's your 13th, from the 13th rib down to your hip. And it's the kind of T-bone steak section. And look at, if you cover, I cover one half of it, that's a great big veal loin chop. And that costs about the same amount as the other, about $7 a pound. But you notice the color, it's a very pale pink. And it's large and big. It's a beautiful piece of veal that's been milk fed. And this has been all trimmed, and now it's ready to tie. On the underside of the meat, running along the backbone, are these tenderloins, the most delicate part of the whole roast. I'm going to season them very lightly with a little sprinkling of thyme. You could use tarragon if you wished. And just a little bit of salt. And then, because they are so tender and they'll be unprotected here, I'm going to put a little fat on them. This is regular bacon, which has been blanched. That means it was boiled for about 8 minutes and then drained to get all the smoky, salty taste out. You don't want it to taste of bacon. Then turn the flaps up, and then it has to be tied in place. That's to keep the flaps from flapping. There, that's all tied and ready to roast. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is to brown it. And I've got here butter and oil. And what it's going to do, it's going to be cover roasted with some aromatic vegetables, because veal by itself doesn't have a great deal of flavor. And so you want to help it along. And I've got in a collection of butter and oil in here. And you have your strings, which make it easy to turn, but you've got to turn it on each side as it slowly browns. It'll take about 20 minutes. Now that's very nicely browned on the top and the bottom. Now I'm going to brown the two ends. Just lift it up by the string there. It'll take 2 or 3 minutes on each side. And once you've got it browned on the ends, you've got a lot of burned fat in there, which you want to get rid of, because if you don't, it's going to be bitter and you'll ruin the taste of this expensive meat. And you can see how brown and kind of burned that is in there. So just take that, just take that and throw it out. And meat goes back in again. You can do the browning ahead if you want, so then you'll be all ready to roast. And now again, because the veal has very little fat of its own, I'm going to put some melted butter over the top in the two ends. This is a bit of thyme again, and these are some browned carrots, onions, and celery. That goes around the meat. And that's going to flavor the juices very nicely. And you want to brown the vegetables, because that's going to give those juices some color. And then again, because your meat is very tender and unfatty, I'm going to put some more of this blanched bacon on it. That's dripping over the sides there. And when it's roasted, you want to baste it, about every half hour or so. And now for some more flavor, I've got some dry Madeira wine, some Cercial, and I'm putting in about a cup there. That's all the liquid this is going to get, but that's going to flavor it beautifully. So on goes the cover. It goes into a 325 oven, and that's going to cook for 1 hour and 3/4. You know, I think a really perfect vegetable for this roast of veal is stuffed onions. The first thing you do, you peel them, and peeling them from the top down is a very good idea, because you're not separating the layers. Then when you come to the bottom down here, be sure and shave that very, very carefully, because you don't want, again, to separate the layers. So just to shave the root end off, so it'll stand up. Then take your sharp little knife and cut a cone out of the top third, because that's going to hollow it out. And then you want to hollow it out further using a little potato boiler. That's the kind of thing you can find anywhere. Just hollow that out, and you don't want to take out too much, because you want to leave a border of about 3/8 inch, just like that. And then take all the insides and chop them all up nicely and saute them in butter until they're very, very, very tender. And take your onion shell, and you have to blanch that. Drop that into lightly simmering water, and it'll take about 8 or 9 minutes, and you want to simmer it very slowly until it is just tender. And take your little knife, and it can just barely go through. And then there are all the onion cups, and they're ready for stuffing. Was that insides of the onions that were very carefully sauteed in butter until very tender. And then I have some cooked rice. I'm going to put in about a cup of rice there. And a bit of Swiss cheese, about, half a cup loosely packed of Swiss cheese. Then you want something to hold it together, and you have to have something like breadcrumbs, because that will act kind of as glue. And a bit of parsley for color, sort of a nice big handful of chopped parsley. About 1/3 of a cup of cream there, because that'll fatten it up. The idea of this stuffing is that it's a very subtle one. And you don't want anything that's too heavy for the veal, because the veal is very delicate in taste. There's a little bit of salt, and a little bit of pepper. And then taste all of that stuffing very, very, very carefully, because you want it to be perfect in every way. And then into the onions. Now I'm putting just a little pinch of breadcrumbs on top, because I want the top to brown very lightly, because it's when it goes in the oven. And then just a little tiny dribble of butter. I think this is not a very fattening onion dish, which is nice. And then we have to have liquid in that comes halfway up, so I'm going to put in about a combination of chicken stock and dry white wine or dry white vermouth. Now this you can get all done ahead if you want, but I'm going to bake it right now. I'm putting these into a preheated 375-degree oven, and you want to cook them for a good hour. The onions have to be perfectly tender, but they still have to hold their shape. I want to now take a good look at that veal. The roast has been in for about 1 hour and 3/4, and if my calculations are correct, it ought to be just about done. I'm going to take its temperature. One of these meat thermometers, and stick that into the thickest part, but not near the bone. And it should register between 155 and 160. Takes about half a minute to go up. Yep, that's right. Now, it's very important after the meat is done that you let it rest. If you try and carve it right now, all the juices are going to come out and follow the knife. What you want is for them to retreat back in. So let it rest for 20 to 30 minutes. Now I'm going to get to the oranges. I think you're going to find this a very attractive and refreshing dessert. It's sliced fresh oranges glazed with orange peel. And you start out with the peel, and you want to have beautiful, firm, fine navel oranges, and then you take the peel very carefully off in a neat strip. That first one wasn't very good, but try and keep the strip just as straight as possible. And you don't want any white in it, or just the tiniest bit. And then see, those are all lying slightly overlapping, and then take your big sharp knife and you cut that into juliennes very neatly. And you do that, we're going to have 6 oranges, and so you do that with all 6 of them. And then they have to be blanched. In other words, they have to be cooked so that they're tender. So drop them into simmering water and simmer them about 8 or 9 minutes until they're perfectly tender. And meanwhile, you have to make a sugar syrup. I have 1 cup of sugar in there, and there's 1/3 cup of water. And you want to bring that to the boil. And you want to watch very carefully as it comes to the boil. And when it comes to the boil, take the pan off and swirl it around And look very carefully at it. You want to make sure that the liquid is absolutely clear, and that indicates that the sugar has completely dissolved. If it hasn't dissolved, as you begin boiling, it's going to turn into crystals, sort of a white, hard mass. And another thing that you want to do is to cover it. And by covering it, the vapor condenses on the lid of the cover and washes down the sides of the pan, and that again prevents crystallization. You want to boil it now until the bubbles are thick. You're going to boil it to the hard or firm ball stage, which is 244 degrees. That ought to be about it. See, the bubbles are very thick now, and the way you test that is take it off heat and drop it from the spoon into some cold water, and then pick it up in your hands. I think that is ready. As you see, you can hold it like that, but it's hardening up. That is the hard ball. That's really, I think, one of the best tests that there is. And then we're going to just take this peel, which was drained, and just dump the peel in. Stir it around. And you can do this way ahead of time because it'll keep for weeks. It's now ready to go to the rest of the dessert. Now these are some of the oranges that have had their zest removed. Now you want to remove the white part of the peel and get right down to the living flesh. So I have a very sharp knife and just cut right down and cut off all bits of white. And then here's one that's all ready to go. And this is ready to slice. Just turn it over and cut it into slices about 3/8 inch thick. And dribble a little bit of orange liqueur, the best possible, over them. And then when you're ready to serve, put them on your plate, arranging them nicely, and there's your orange peel, the decoration, and here are your beautiful chocolate truffles. Now I'd like to show you how to carve that veal. Carving is really very easy, though it may not look so. You just have to know how it's constructed. You don't carve it on the bone. You have to take the meat off. And see, we've made one cut right down on one side of this bone, and then you take your knife and you carve all the way down, and you'll notice that the bone is just like a shelf. See, that's your backbone in there. And then you carve on the other side here, do exactly the same thing, and then the meat is very easy to carve. And I think I like to do it on a slant, because then you get nice slices. Look at that, see, that's beautifully done. That's very slightly pink, but that makes beautiful meat. Now on the underside is where that little tenderloin came from. You see there's your backbone, and this is the tenderloin right here. You just cut that off exactly the same way and cut that into nice little nuggets. So, now that you know how to carve a saddle of veal, let's get to the first course, and that also is something very special.
I hope I have everything. Oysters, seaweed, rock salt.
Leslie, what's all this stuff?
Believe it or not, you're looking at the first course.
Well, that's wonderful. Come on.
I'm ready.
All right.
I call this curry glazed oysters. You've got to start with fresh ones, which we're going to open. That's the worst part. There are a lot of ways to open an oyster. The easiest one is to get your fisherman to do it. If you're not that lucky, arm yourself with a towel or a pot holder, a good oyster knife, and hopefully an oyster that's got a nice hinge. Take the knife right in the corner, press down and twist, and it'll make a little snap. And then over your strainer and bowl, because we're going to save all the juice, sever the top muscle here. Now we can throw the top away, save the juice, scrape the plump little oyster into the strainer, and we're even going to use the deeper bottom half of the shell as a vessel for serving. We'll clean it up and set it over here like I did with these other ones. Now we're going to take the juice we saved and make the sauce. In the saucepan, we've got some butter and some finely minced shallots. We use about 1 shallot for each half dozen oysters. And I'm going to add a mild curry powder, 1 teaspoon for each 2 shallots. We're going to cook it with the shallots and the butter until it smells terrific, 2 or 3 minutes. Smells divine, and the shallots are soft, so we're ready to add the strained oyster liquid, which we're going to let reduce about 3 or 4 minutes until syrupy. It's ready. Look, see how nicely it's reduced? It's time to add the cream and let it reduce again. It's nicely thickened now and ready. We're going to add a little bit of beurre Marnier, nothing more than softened butter and flour mixed together. Stir it in for a minute or two. This will give the sauce some structure. I have 3 egg yolks to enrich the sauce. We'll beat them together a little bit. Add some sauce from the pan that's hot, just so they don't curdle when you put them back in. And then pour the whole yolk mixture back into the hot sauce. Now we're going to stir it, cook a minute or two until the yolks have finished cooking. While the sauce cools, we'll make our carrot puree. In the processor, 6 pretty well cooked carrots ready to be pureed. Add a little salt, some freshly ground white pepper, and about a teaspoon of tarragon vinegar for the acidity and the flavor. We'll pour in a ½ cup of cream. Okay, beautiful. Now we're ready to add it to our oyster shell. Make a little pillow for the oyster. Now I'm transferring the filled shells into a bed of hot rock salt, which will serve to keep the shells steady and also retain heat. The last step is to place a plump little oyster atop the dollop of carrot. The sauce, it's come down to room temperature, a ½ cup of heavy cream whipped, folded in, and napping each oyster with about a tablespoon before putting it under the broiler. After a minute or two under the broiler, they should look this golden brown. Then quickly onto a plate of seaweed from your local ocean, and you're ready. Julia, you'll love them.
The man responsible for bringing us our wines this evening is Louis Martini, I think probably one of the best-known winemakers in the country. We're having a dry sherry with aperitifs, a Chardonnay with that marvelous oyster dish, a Pinot Noir with our saddle of veal, and cream sherry with the orange and truffle dessert. Louis, I'm delighted that we're having dry sherry as an aperitif. We had cold iced sherry in Spain a lot. I was wondering if it was getting popular around here.
Well, we use it all the time at home, but in this country, you know, white wine is quite often used.
Well, I think it's time we had can we have a little taste of that?
Sure can.
I've never had your sherry before, Louis. How do you make it? Does the Solera, was it the same as in Spain, where you mix the new brew with a little bit of the old, and that's it?
That's correct. Basically, we don't do it exactly the same way they do, but basically it's the same system.
So, well, what about, I notice...
Sure.
I'll have a little taste of that. That is nice. I like it chilled.
Well, sherry should be chilled. It's fairly alcoholic, and it's much better if all these flavors are subdued. They marry better.
One thing I've noticed, Louis, that on this Pinot Noir there's a specific vineyard noted. Is that something new?
This is called Napa Valley Pinot Noir, and it's a Las Amigas vineyard, which happens to be one of our vineyards in the Carneros district of Napa, down by the bay. And we are starting to put out wines according to some of our individual vineyards, because they do have individual characteristics, and we'd like to get them known for that characteristic.
I also thought it's remarkable that you can produce a really good wine at a reasonable price. How do you do it?
Of course, to produce a good wine, it probably isn't much more expensive than to produce another one, other than you have to get very good grapes.
Well, what makes a $17 wine $17?
I can tell you what makes our wine our price. I'm not sure I can tell you what makes a $17 one worth that much. We basically price our on a cost of production.
Oh.
And we've been in business for a long time. We have land that we've had for a long time. Obviously, our overhead is not as high as a brand new winery would be. So some of these other wines must get high prices in order to pay off their investments, whereas we don't have that kind of investment.
And you've been in it in a long time and know what you're doing. Thank you so much, Louis, for bringing these good wines. I think they're going to go beautifully with our dinner. Dinner is served. Elizabeth is there. Woohoo! Look at this. This is the main event. This is a whole saddle of veal that's been braised and served with braised stuffed onions and asparagus. That's something you don't see every day. Yes. That's lovely, isn't it? We got from Seattle. We saw them being delayed. Thanks so much for coming. Hope you had as much fun as we did. See you next time.